It wasn't always pretty, but the Jets grind out their first win of the season in Nashville. We're going to talk about the win and the questions it raises about this team today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, September 16th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We have a Jets win to recap today as the Jets defeated the Tennessee Titans 24-17 yesterday in Nashville. The Jets improved their record to 1-1 and head into a short week. They play Thursday night against the Patriots with a victory. This is the type of game that I do not think should lead us to easy narratives. Now, there are some pretty easy narratives to throw out there. One is that the Jets won. I think the one that ESPN and the national media, NFL Network, and all those guys will cling on to is Aaron Rodgers delivering a win, Aaron Rodgers clutch. I think that the takeaways from this game, though, should be a bit more nuanced because I saw 3 paths this game could potentially go. One would be the Jets could have lost this game, which would have been an abject disaster. And we'd be having a very different show today. We'd be talking about the Jets being 0-2, which you never want to be 0-2 in the NFL. I mean, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. You can recover from 0-2, but it puts you in a really, really tough place. And for this Jets team, as we talked about on Friday, it would be 0-2 would be tougher for this Jets team than it would be a lot of other teams because this team hasn't really proven itself yet. So that would have been one path. The other path would have been the Jets going out there and looking every bit the Super Bowl contender they've been hyped up to be. The Jets going out there, crushing the Titans, dominating for 4 quarters, looking like the clearly superior team. If that was what happened, we could say, okay, this thing's back on track. This is a really good team. Maybe that Monday night in San Francisco, they just had an off night. Instead, we kind of got the middle path. Look, winning's better than losing. Again, we avoided disaster in this game. It was not a win, though, that really suggested that this Jets team has hit its stride yet. So you can look at this glass half full, glass half empty. One is that, Jets didn't play a great game. Glass is half full would be, hey, the Jets didn't play a great game and they still won. And of course, there's time to sort this stuff out. There's time for the team to improve. How a team performs week 2 is not always how a team's going to perform once we get to November, December. There's time for this team to figure it out, put the pieces together, and maybe hit their peak later on in the season. But this was not a game that left me coming away feeling like, hey, this Jets team is really clicking on all cylinders now. It's more kind of like the wins the Jets had in early 2023, where it was like, hey, you take the win. Winning is better than losing. We got some stuff to figure out, though. Of course, last year the Jets did not really figure stuff out. This year they have a chance to. And I think Rodgers' performance is actually kind of a good microcosm of this because, look, there was some good. And, again, I think like the national storyline is going to be Rodgers is super clutch. And there's obviously that's fair because Rodgers did hit some big passes in the 4th quarter. I think that his performance, though, is a little bit more nuanced than that. I think there were some moments where he struggled. And this did not look like vintage Aaron Rodgers. And I think, with Rodgers being 40 years old and him coming off this injury, the question remains, how good is Rodgers going to be? Now, what we saw is a quarterback who's clearly better than what the Jets have had the last couple of years. I mean, the one thing Rodgers has going for him is even if he's in decline, which he seems to be, he's still going to look like Mahomes next to Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold and Mark Sanchez. He had some big time passes in this game. It was a very uneven performance, though. And there were the thing that I noticed about Rodgers' performance is that when he threw in rhythm, when he felt confident early in the play, good things were going to happen. And that's not just saying he got the ball out quickly. And that's not just saying he's a check down artist. There were a couple of deep passes he hit where I would consider them rhythm passes because he saw a matchup he liked early in the play and decided, I'm going there. The touchdown pass to Breece Hall in the 3rd quarter was one. The huge pass to Mike Williams on 2nd and 16 in the 4th quarter, that was another one where he just saw early in the play, I like this matchup. I'm going to go after it. Then however, when he got deeper into plays, you saw signs of struggle. You saw signs he wasn't comfortable because in the past, that's been where Aaron Rodgers has kind of scrambled, where he's kind of, broken left or broken right to extend the play. He can't do that anymore. And I think he realizes he can't do that anymore, which is a positive because you don't want to see him like trying to run left and trying to run right and take a sack. But you can see he's still very much adjusting to this new normal for him, which is going to be he's going to be really confined to the pockets. And that's a struggle for him. And you saw I felt like he was very, very jittery in the pocket when he had to hold the ball, when he could not get the ball out quickly. And you saw some of his passes were off target. Now, I don't think the mobility is coming back. So I think the question is, can Rodgers adjust to this new normal? And then there are some other things that I'd expect to improve along the way. I think there were moments where he wasn't on the same page with his receivers. There was a couple plays with Lazard. There was a deep ball in the fourth quarter to Lazard that he just missed. There was a smoke route to Lazard in the slot where he threw wide. There was a play passed to Jeremy Ruckert in the end zone where they weren't really on the same page. And you might attribute that to the fact that these guys did not play together last year, and they didn't really get preseason reps. Which maybe the Jets, based on the way the Jets have played this year, especially the first 5 quarters, you started to wonder whether this coaching staff should have provided these guys with preseason reps, because after like the 5th quarter, after the first quarter of yesterday's game, suddenly things started to click a little bit better. So, that'll probably come along. I think Rodgers is still shaking off the rust to an extent because when you saw the issues the Jets had with the play clock, maybe they weren't getting the plays in quick enough, but it certainly felt like Rodgers was kind of just losing track of the play clock 3 or 4 times. The Jets either had to take a timeout or take a delay of game penalty. So all of this is uneven. And look, at the end of the day, you take the win. I don't know that this performance for Rodgers is going to be good enough to beat a lot of teams. I think the question is, was this a bad game for Aaron Rodgers? Because if it was, then hey, you know what? You'll absolutely take that. You'll take a guy who still hit even on a bad day. Still hits a lot of big passes, still makes the plays when he needs to in the fourth quarter, and delivers a win. Is this kind of like a new normal performance? If that's the case, then this Jets team may have to recalibrate its expectations, because in many ways, and again, I think Rodgers is kind of a microcosm of this. If this is the type of performance the Jets can expect from Aaron Rodgers going forward, then this may not be the team that's a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I think that the Jets are going to need better, and it's not just about Rodgers, but this performance was good enough to beat a team like the Tennessee Titans. And that's a good thing. Look, we've spent years where the Jets are the worst team in the league. We've had years where the Jets were the team you didn't need to play your A game against. Yesterday, the Jets did not play their A game, and Rodgers did not play his A game, and they still found a chance. They still found a way to win. So that's a positive, because the Jets, it shows you that going up against some of the lesser teams in the league, the Jets don't necessarily need to be at their best to win. The question I have, was this the Jets' best performance? Because we talked about this. I talked about this. I'm usually not a big style points guy, but I said this on Friday. I said this heading into the game, that I wanted to see the Jets go out there and absolutely dominate. And that did not happen. And again, I'll take the win. Look, it's not like they lost. Look, at the end of the day, wins are precious in the NFL. But this was not a game that I come away from now fully convinced the Jets are contenders. It's a game where I say, okay, we got to win. Now let's see if we can build on some stuff. Of course, the Jets do have some very positive things to build on from this game. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, they got some standout performances from some young players, some very, very encouraging efforts by guys who were drafted in the last couple of years. And we'll talk about them continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quickly as 15 minutes. And PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup is not perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. Right? I mean, we all have our own rituals. We all have our food that we like. What's in your spread? Do you like pizza? Do you like wings? Do you like something else? You can get it on DoorDash, your ultimate spread. They can bring it to you. And right now, you can use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer, terms apply. Promo is not valid for offers containing alcohol. Again, it's promo code LOCKEDFALL24. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDFALL, number 4 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 on your first order with DoorDash. Limited time offer, terms apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. We're here to recap a Jets victory as they beat the Tennessee Titans 24-17 yesterday in Nashville. Jets improved their record to 1-1 on the season. Let's talk about some of the heroes of this game. And I'm going to do something unconventional. Usually when we talk about special teamers, especially guys who aren't the kicker, who, so I guess if like the kicker hits a big field goal, we'll talk about him immediately. But normally if like there's a great special teams performance, we just kind of tack it on at the end. Let's give the special teamer some love today. Irv Charles. I mean, I can't tell you how many Jets fans ask, why is this guy on the roster? He's got no upside as a wide receiver. And look, I don't think Irv Charles is ever going to play a big game as a wide receiver. If you ask me, is Irv Charles ever going to have a 100-yard game as a receiver? The answer is probably going to be no. Is Irv Charles ever going to have a 50-yard game as a receiver? Probably no. Is Irv Charles ever going to have a 30-yard game as a receiver? Probably no. But there's a reason he's on the team. Think of him less as a receiver and think of him more as a special teams ace. And he showed why he's on the team yesterday because he made some huge plays on special teams and punt coverage, a pair of tackles that stymied a punt return, and then a huge block punt in the second half that set up a Jets field goal. We underestimate the role of special teams. I see it all happen all the time. We kind of just view it as an afterthought. But in a league where so many of these games come down to one score, in a league where this game came down to one score, a standout special teams performance, can make a huge difference for a team. And I think Irv Charles, if we're talking about heroes of the game yesterday for the Jets, it's easy to forget about Irv Charles, but he delivered in this game for this team. I think you also have to talk about this young backfield, which is starting to look very dynamic. And, the Jets did not really incorporate Braylon Allen much in the first game. It was all Breece Hall. I think we saw it's going to be good to have a mix of Breece and Braylon going forward. Braylon Allen played outstanding. So did Breece Hall. I think this is a good 1-2 punch, and these guys complement each other. Because even though Breece is a bigger back, he's more the lightning, and Allen's more of just the thunder. But, Breece is a bigger back, and Allen's got a little burst to him. And I think these were the two best players the Jets had on offense in this game. I mean, if you look at their stats, Breece Hall, 62 yards on 14 carries, Allen, 33 yards on 7 carries, but they were also very important in the receiving game. Hall caught 7 passes for 52 yards, Allen, 2 catches for 23 yards. I mean, these guys were the bulk of the Jets offense in this game. Breece was actually the Jets leading receiver, and Breece had that touchdown that was a fantastic catch in the third quarter. The trio combined for all 3 Jets touchdowns. And, I can't tell you how long I've been watching the Jets, and if you've watched the Jets for like the last 15 years, that they have had a tendency at the running back position. And that tendency is bringing these huge name backs on their last legs and try and squeeze one more good year out of them. And it usually fails. It usually doesn't work. It did not work with Frank Gore. It did not work with Le'Veon Bell. I think they were looking for a little bit more from Le'Veon Bell, but did not work with Le'Veon Bell, did not work with Matt Forte, did not work with Chris Johnson. And maybe the lesson should be that, running back's a young man's position. And relative to other positions on the field, it's easier to find quality running backs in the middle to later stages of the draft. And the Jets got Braylon Allen in the 4th round. He looks like a player. You've heard it since the day he set foot on the practice field. There's been buzz around Braylon Allen. The Jets think that this kid can play. And we saw a little bit of it in the preseason, especially that week 1 preseason game against the Washington Commanders. This was kind of his breakout party where, a couple touchdowns, a big run, the game-winning touchdown run in the 4th quarter, which was well blocked, by the way. The Jets did a good job up front, but Allen finished the run. There was one guy to beat. There was one unblocked guy, and Allen beat him. And, big back, obviously a guy who runs with power, but he's got a little burst to him that, that can be underestimated. This duo looks dynamic. And, going back to the first segment, if Rodgers is not going to be the Green Bay version of Rodgers, the Jets are probably going to need to lean more into these running backs. In fact, as I mentioned, these guys were important in the passing game. If we're talking about number of receptions, Breece Hall was the leading receiver, 7 receptions. Garrett Wilson was number 2 with 4. We're talking about yardage. These guys were number 2 and 3 in receiving yards in this game. Breece Hall, 52 yards. Braylon Allen, 23 yards. The only receiver with more yardage in this game for the Jets was Garrett Wilson. This looks like a fantastic duo in the backfield. I mean, I think that we may look back on this as like the breakout party of this 1-2 punch for the Jets in the backfield. Last year, the guy I didn't mention, the guy I was saving for this, we remember last year the Jets did the thing where they got the aging back once more in Dalvin Cook. Essentially, if Brees wasn't on the field, the stats were going to be awful. This year, Brees Hall can take a rest, and the Jets are going to get quality snaps out of Braylon Allen. And this is the type of thing that maybe can sustain this offense, because Jets had a lot of offensive issues in this game, but the running backs, really delivered. And I'm very excited to see what this running back duo can do going forward. And another guy who I thought delivered in this game was Will McDonald, who, had 3 sacks. He was credited for 3 sacks in this game. And one of them was really huge. One of them was on the last drive of the game where, the Jets were kind of facing the Titans had driven into the red zone. Jets were kind of the backs of the goal line. They had to make a stop. Will McDonald got a sack, 3 sacks in this game. Listen, we all know how important Will McDonald's going to be for this team going forward, especially without Hassan Reddick. But now Jets might be without Jermaine Johnson, because Johnson left the game and what really looked like a non-contact injury. He was kind of contacted, and then he made a cut and went down. And Jets are already, kind of putting out there that they're fearing the worst with Jermaine Johnson. So suddenly this defensive line is looking very, very thin. And that means Will McDonald's got to step up, because even if Will McDonald's producing, this defensive line is now a question mark. But at least if Will McDonald's producing, there's something you can bank on. There's something you can hang your hat on. That's something the Jets are going to need. The Jets are really going to need to lean on him, especially if Jermaine misses an extended amount of time, because, I'm not sure what the Hassan Reddick situation is going to be. If the Jets are without Jermaine Johnson, then suddenly this defensive end spot looks very questionable. Will McDonald, 3 sacks, a guy who really delivered in this game, especially after a week of questioning. Will McDonald did not look good week 1 against San Francisco. This was an important bounce back game for Will McDonald. I think it's fair to say he delivered. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to concerns that probably emanate from this game for the Jets, because as we mentioned, this was not a dominant performance. There's some things the Jets need to clean up, and we'll talk about them continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. Jets play against New England Thursday night. It's not too late to find tickets. Game Time's the place to go. And you should know that Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste any time. Game Time makes it easy to find tickets, and they also give you the view from your seat. They give you a picture of what it'll look like when you arrive at your venue, so there are no surprises, no obstructed views you weren't expecting. Game Time's amazing. I've used Game Time myself. Just pull out your phone or mobile device. You can do it an hour or two before the event starts, and you won't be able to believe the deals that you find. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. Well, Locked On NFL, it's one word, no space, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. We're breaking down the Jets' victory as they defeat the Tennessee Titans 24-17 in Nashville. Jets, even up their record at 1-1 on the season. A game the Jets won, so you take the win, but there are certainly some concerns that come from this game. I think number one we just talked about is Jermaine Johnson, because anything in theory is fixable except injuries. And we've talked about Johnson went down on a play that it was kind of scary, because it was not really a contact injury. I mean, he was kind of contacted a little bit before it happened, but it looked like he just went down because he was trying to make a cut. And sometimes those are really serious injuries, and the Jets are fearing the worst. There were some reports after the game it could be an Achilles. Now, I'm going to reserve judgment until we hear official word from the Jets, because as we know, sometimes the Jets are not entirely accurate with their initial prognostications with injuries. This is not a team that bats 1,000. Sometimes they downplay injuries and they end up being very serious. And there have been instances in the past where Jets have been very concerned about a player and it ends up not being as bad as they thought it would be. Now, if we're talking other concerns, look, the offense needs to start games quicker. Again, maybe this is just they didn't work together enough in preseason. Maybe this is the case where the offense could have used some work in preseason, but that first half was not a good performance. And I think you could say it across the board. I don't think there are many guys who played well on the offensive side of the ball. Jets entered the locker room with 7 points and less than 90 yards of offense. And look, that was good. And again, that was good. I think one of the themes of this show is that what they did was good enough to beat Tennessee. And that's a positive. Look, you always are happy with a win. It's also positive that the Jets can maybe not play their A game and beat other teams, because, if you go back 4 years, 5 years, there were games where the Jets could have played their A game and still lost because they were so talent deficient. The Jets have talent now, but they're going to need better offensive play. And I think a lot of this goes back to the scheming. Watch the first quarter of that game, how predictable the offense was, how uncreative the scheming was. Look, if you want to give Nathaniel Hackett some credit, which I'm always hesitant to do, he did come up with some interesting wrinkles. The package with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen on the field at the same time that you saw at various points as the game got deeper. There were a couple of, the adjustments that they made to kind of spread the field with Rodgers, allow him to see things and get the ball out quicker. There were some decent things, but it can't take this long. And I think through 2 weeks of the season, what we can say about Nathaniel Hackett is that the theory that Aaron Rodgers is going to make Hackett irrelevant is not panning out very well. Hackett's clearly making this offense worse. Now, Rodgers is able to paper over the issues better than Zach Wilson was, but this offensive coordinator looks like a problem to me. And I see an offense that frequently, again, is just very predictable, very easy to figure out what's going on. They don't put enough stress on the defense scheme-wise. This is just something the Jets are going to have to work around through the course of the season. You hope Hackett, you at least hope Hackett has a few wrinkles each game, again, like the Breece Braylon package. But I've left these first 2 weeks feeling like that idea that Aaron Rodgers is around and now we don't have to worry about Nathaniel Hackett, it's just not holding up very well for me. I think you talk about the defensive side of the ball. Now, the defense showed some flashes, but again, defense got off to a very slow start in this game. Second drive, Titans go right down the field. Third drive, the Titans were going right down the field. And for whatever reason, Will Levis decided to roll the ball to the Jets, which I don't think I've ever seen. Like, I've seen a lot of bizarre plays by young quarterbacks before. I've seen a lot of bad plays by young quarterbacks before. I don't think I've ever seen that one before. This is somebody who's watched the Jets for a really long time. I don't think I've ever seen a young quarterback do something like that. Will Levis just doesn't roll the ball to the Jets. I wonder how this game goes, and I wonder how this defense responds. But from that point forward, I do think the defense played pretty well. There were some hiccups. And a lot, I think the safety play from this team needs to get better. Chuck Clark had some really rough angles again. He committed a couple penalties. There was on the long touchdown pass. I still don't know how he didn't pick that ball off. We've talked about heading into the season how safety may be the weak point on this defense. Through 2 weeks, it certainly has looked like a weak point for this team on that side of the ball. Another guy who played, Sauce Gardner, I thought had a bad game, but I have confidence Sauce will bounce back. I have more concerns about the way the defense is starting the game and the safety position. I think that the best thing you can say for this game in many ways is kind of like what they call a coach's dream, because you get the win. You don't have to deal with a loss, but there's plenty to work on. And there's plenty the Jets will need to get better at and improve on as they move forward in this season. Most important thing is the Jets got to 1-1. Now they got to clean some stuff up and if they want to keep it going. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.